Poppy Vale's dirt-stained hands are frozen midair above a coffin, a glitter-covered birthday wreath spelling "Happy Birthday, Crystal," tumbling in slow motion onto the body of Chicago's most feared mafia kingpin. 300 witnesses hold their breath. Then Dante Valieri, the cold-blooded killer who arranged the murder, starts laughing. Within 48 hours, he will own her debts, her failing flower shop, and her entire future. She doesn't know it yet, but the man smiling at her chaos is about to drag her into a world where love and violence are the same thing. If you're watching from your city tonight, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me where you're from. Let's see how far Poppy's story travels before it ends. The morning Poppy Vale's life officially ended began with a dead battery, a parking ticket, and the kind of migraine that felt like someone was using her skull as a drum set. She stood outside her ancient Honda Civic in the freezing March wind, holding jumper cables she didn't know how to use, watching her breath fog the air, while tears threatened to ruin the mascara she'd applied in the dark that morning because her electricity had been shut off again. The funeral was in 40 minutes. The arrangement she was supposed to deliver, an elegant white lily display for Angelo Scarpari's service, was waiting back at the shop. The problem was simpler than it should have been. She'd grabbed the wrong flowers. Poppy discovered this fact approximately 12 seconds after sprinting through the cathedral's side entrance, sweat plastering her second-hand dress to her back, her bun unraveling in greasy brown chunks around her face. She set the arrangement down on the marble floor to catch her breath, glanced at the enormous arrangement already positioned beside the closed casket at the front of the church, then looked down at what she'd carried inside. Pink carnations, glitter, a ribbon that read "Happy Birthday, Crystal" in looping silver script. "Oh God," she whispered. The Sweet 16 party arrangement, the one she'd prepared yesterday for the Henderson girls' backyard celebration scheduled for tomorrow. She'd set it on the wrong shelf, grabbed it in her panic, driven it across the city, and now 300 people in expensive black clothing were beginning to fill the pews. Poppy's vision tunneled. Her hands went numb. The rational part of her brain, the part that had kept her alive through evictions and repo men and bill collectors who called at midnight, screamed at her to leave the arrangement by the door and run. Nobody would know. She could disappear into the street, drive back to the shop, get the correct flowers, and pretend this never happened. But the funeral was starting. Right now. A man in a dark suit near the entrance gave her a look that said she needed to move. Fast. So Poppy made a choice. She picked up the birthday wreath, held it against her chest like a shield, and started walking down the center aisle toward the casket. Her heel caught a warped floorboard 3 steps in. Everything happened in slow motion after that. The wreath flew from her hands. Her body pitched forward. Her knees slammed into cold marble hard enough to crack bone. The arrangement sailed through the air in a spinning arc of pink carnations and glitter, trailing silver ribbon like a streamer, before landing directly on top of the body inside the open half of Angelo Scarpari's casket. The sound it made wasn't loud, just a soft thump, followed by the faint rustle of tissue paper and the patter of glitter raining onto a dead man's suit. Then silence. Completely suffocating silence. Poppy lifted her head. Her palms were scraped bloody. Her tights had torn open at both knees, and from where she knelt in the aisle, she could see the birthday wreath sitting cheerfully atop Angelo Scarpari's folded hands, the ribbon draped across his chest, glitter sparkling against the dark fabric like fairy dust. 300 people stared at her. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. Then someone started laughing, not polite laughter, not the kind that tried to ease tension or brush away awkwardness. This was genuine, low and rough and completely out of place. Poppy's gaze snapped toward the front pew. A man sat there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black suit so perfectly tailored it looked like it had been grown on his body, instead of sewn. His hair was dark and pushed back from a face that could have been carved from stone, sharp jaw, brutal cheekbones, the kind of face that made you think of old Roman emperors who fed people to lions for entertainment. He was staring directly at her, still laughing. His eyes were the coldest thing she'd ever seen, pale gray, empty, like ice over deep water. But his mouth curved in a smile that didn't reach those eyes at all, and something about the wrongness of it made Poppy's stomach drop straight through the floor. She knew who he was. Everyone in Chicago knew who Dante Valieri was. Even a broke florist who spent her days wrist-deep in dirt and her nights dodging creditors had heard the stories. Valieri ran the north side. He controlled the ports, the unions, the politicians who smiled for cameras while signing laws written in his offices. People whispered that he was worse than the old bosses, colder, more efficient, the kind of man who didn't waste time on warnings. And he was laughing at her. Poppy tried to stand. Her legs wobbled. Her heel was missing, snapped off somewhere during the fall. She limped forward on uneven feet, reached the casket, and grabbed the birthday wreath with shaking hands. "I'm sorry," she whispered, to the body, to the room, to God, or whatever was listening. "I'm so sorry." She yanked the arrangement off the corpse. Glitter scattered everywhere. A few carnations came loose and tumbled into the casket. She tried to grab them, her bloody fingers slipping on the smooth petals, but someone caught her wrist. The touch was gentle, but it stopped her completely. She looked up. Dante Valieri stood beside her now. Up close, he was even more terrifying. Taller than she'd thought, broad enough to block out half the light from the stained glass windows. His hand wrapped entirely around her wrist, and she could feel the heat of his skin through her panic. "Leave it," he said quietly. His voice didn't match his face. It was softer than it should have been, almost kind. That made it worse. Poppy's voice cracked. "I brought the wrong flowers. I didn't mean, I know. It was an accident, I swear, I said leave it." He released her wrist. Then he plucked one of the pink carnations from the casket, turned it between his fingers like he was examining something fragile, and tucked it into the pocket of his suit jacket. The gesture was so absurd, so completely wrong, that Poppy forgot to breathe. Dante looked at her again. That empty smile still hadn't left his face. "What's your name?" She should have lied. Every survival instinct she'd ever developed screamed at her to lie. "Poppy," she whispered. "Poppy Vale. Poppy." He said it slowly, like he was tasting the sound. "The flower girl. I own a shop. Vale Blooms. I made a mistake, that's all. Please, I didn't mean any disrespect." "I know you didn't." His hand moved. For one horrible second, she thought he was reaching for her throat. Instead, he brushed a strand of hair away from her face, tucked it behind her ear with the same careful precision he'd used on the flower. "Go sit down," Dante said. "Front row, next to me." "What?" "You heard me." "I should leave. I'll just sit down." It wasn't a suggestion. Poppy's legs moved on their own. She stumbled into the front pew, clutching the ruined birthday wreath against her chest, her torn tights sticking to the bloody scrapes on her knees. Dante sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive, cedar and smoke. The service started. She didn't hear a word of it. Her entire body vibrated with adrenaline and terror. Every few minutes, she felt Dante's gaze slide toward her, not threatening, just watching, like she was an animal in a zoo he'd never seen before. When the priest finally finished talking and people began lining up to pay their respects, Dante leaned close to her ear. "Stay," he murmured. "Don't move until I come back." Then he stood and walked to the casket. Poppy watched him bend over Angelo Scarpari's body, his face perfectly composed, his hands folded in prayer. He looked like a man genuinely mourning a loss, but she'd heard the stories. Angelo Scarpari had been Dante's rival. They'd been fighting over territory for 2 years. And 3 days ago, Scarpari's car had exploded in a restaurant parking lot, killing him instantly. No witnesses, no suspects, just a very convenient accident. And now Dante Valieri stood over the body, playing the role of the respectful mourner, while a pink carnation sat in his pocket like a trophy. The service ended an hour later. People filed out slowly, talking in low voices, shooting curious glances at the strange woman still sitting in the front row holding a birthday wreath. Poppy kept her head down and prayed they'd all leave so she could disappear into the crowd. But when the cathedral finally emptied, Dante was still there. He sat down beside her again. "You can go now," he said. Poppy stood so fast she nearly fell. Her missing heel made her stagger, but she caught herself on the pew and started limping toward the exit. "Poppy." She froze. Dante hadn't moved. He sat with his elbows on his knees, hands clasped loosely, staring at the casket. "I'll be visiting your shop tomorrow," he said calmly. "Noon. Make sure you're there." Her throat closed. Why? Because I'm curious. About what? He turned his head, looked at her with those empty gray eyes. About how someone survives being that unlucky. Then he smiled again. That same wrong, cold smile. And Poppy ran. Tab. She didn't sleep that night. Vale Blooms sat on a struggling corner in a neighborhood where half the storefronts had steel grates, and the other half had been abandoned entirely. The shop had been her grandmother's once, then her mother's. Now it was Poppy's, along with the crushing debt that came with it. She'd kept the place alive through stubbornness and desperation. Wake at 5, cut stems until her hands bled, arrange bouquets for weddings she'd never afford to attend, deliver flowers to parties she'd never be invited to, go home to her apartment where the heat didn't work and the landlord had stopped returning calls. It wasn't much, but it was hers. And tomorrow, Dante Valieri was going to walk through her door. Poppy sat on the floor behind the counter, knees pulled to her chest, surrounded by buckets of unsold roses and wilting lilies. Her cat, a three-legged tabby named Dirt, curled in her lap, purring despite the cold. "What do I do?" she whispered into his fur. Dirt had no answers. At some point near dawn, she fell asleep against a bag of potting soil and woke to the sound of the bell above the door ringing. She jerked upright. Dirt yowled and scrambled away. The clock on the wall read 11:58 a.m. The door swung open. Dante Valieri stepped inside. He wore a different suit today. Charcoal gray, no tie, white shirt open at the collar. He looked like he'd just stepped out of a magazine spread titled Men Who Could Ruin Your Life. 2 other men followed him, both built like walls, both watching Poppy like she might pull a weapon from behind the daisies. Dante looked around the shop slowly, took in the peeling paint, the ancient cash register, the buckets of flowers arranged in rows that tried very hard to look organized and mostly failed. "This is it?" he asked. Poppy stood, brushed dirt off her jeans. "What do you want?" "I told you, I'm curious." "About my shop?" "About you." He moved deeper into the space, ran a finger along the counter, inspected the dust on his fingertip, then wiped it on a handkerchief he pulled from his pocket. "How much do you owe?" Dante asked. "Excuse me?" "Debt." "How much?" Her jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." "Everything in this neighborhood is my business." "I don't owe you anything." "Not yet." He glanced at one of his men. "Marco, show her." The shorter of the 2 guards pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket and handed it to Poppy. She opened it with shaking hands. It was a list. Every debt she owed, every creditor, every missed payment, every late notice, every threatening letter she'd shoved into a drawer and tried to forget. Rent, 4 months overdue. Utilities, disconnection notice pending. Supplier invoices, 60 days past due. Credit cards, maxed out in collections. Student loans from the business degree she'd never finished. Default status. The total sat at the bottom of the page in bold black numbers. $47,000. "How did you—" Her voice broke. "How did you get this?" "I made some calls." Dante took the paper back, folded it precisely, tucked it into his jacket. "You're drowning." "I'm managing." "You're 3 weeks from eviction." "I'll figure it out." "No." He stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "You won't." Poppy's hands curled into fists. "What do you want from me? I'm going to pay it off." The words didn't make sense. She stared at him. "What?" "All of it. Every debt. Every bill. I'll make the calls today. By tomorrow morning, you'll owe nothing to anyone." Her chest tightened. "Why?" "Because I can. That's not a reason." Dante smiled. That same cold, wrong smile from yesterday. "Because yesterday," he said quietly, "you made me laugh for the first time in 5 years, and I want to see what else you can do." Poppy's pulse hammered in her throat. "I don't want your money." "Yes, you do." "I don't want to owe you." "Then consider it a gift." "Nobody gives gifts like that." "I do." He reached out, tucked another strand of hair behind her ear, exactly like he had done in the cathedral. "Here's what's going to happen," Dante said. "I'm going to clear your debts. You're going to close this shop." "No, and you're going to come work for me." I'm not in the way you're thinking. His voice stayed calm, patient, like he was explaining something to a child. I need someone to take care of my estate. The grounds, the gardens. They've been neglected for years, and I don't have time to deal with it. Hire a landscaper. I want you. You don't even know me. I know enough. His hand dropped. He stepped back, giving her space to breathe. You're desperate. You're unlucky. And you're still standing. That's more than most people can say. Poppy's vision blurred. She didn't know if it was from rage or exhaustion or the horrible, creeping realization that he was right. She was drowning, and he was the only thing that looked like a life raft. What if I say no? She whispered. Dante's expression didn't change. Then I walk out of here, he said, and in 3 weeks, someone else buys this building at auction. You lose everything, and I never think about you again. That's it? That's it. She wanted to believe him, but the way he looked at her, steady, patient, like a hunter who already knew the prey was caught, told her he knew exactly what her answer would be. Poppy closed her eyes, thought about the disconnection notices, the landlord's threats, the creditors who called at midnight, the way she'd started rationing food because she couldn't afford both groceries and heating. She thought about Dirt, who deserved better than freezing in a one-room apartment. And she thought about yesterday, the glitter, the laughter, the pink carnation in Dante Valieri's pocket. When she opened her eyes, he was still waiting. If I do this, Poppy said slowly, I'm not your property. I'm an employee. We're clear on that? Crystal clear. And I can leave whenever I want. If you want to leave, I won't stop you. You're lying. Probably. He smiled again. But you're going to say yes anyway. She hated that he was right. Fine, Poppy whispered. But I'm bringing my cat. Of course you are. Dante pulled a business card from his pocket, set it on the counter between them. My driver will pick you up tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Bring whatever you need. Leave the rest. Then he turned and walked out, his guards following behind him like shadows. Poppy stood alone in her shop, surrounded by dying flowers and the ruins of her life, holding a business card with an address she didn't recognize. And for the first time in years, she couldn't tell if she'd just been saved or bought. The car that arrived at 6 a.m. wasn't a car. It was a tank dressed in black paint and tinted windows, idling outside Vale Blooms like a predator waiting for prey. The driver didn't get out, didn't knock, just sat there with the engine running while Poppy stood on the sidewalk clutching a duffel bag that contained everything she owned that mattered. 3 changes of clothes, her grandmother's gardening shears, a photo of her mother she kept folded in her wallet, and dirt stuffed into a carrier that was too small for him. The cat yowled continuously, a sound like murder happening in slow motion. Poppy's hand shook as she reached for the door handle. The interior smelled like leather and something else. Something expensive she couldn't name. The seats were softer than her mattress. The driver, a man built like a refrigerator with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, didn't look at her, just put the car in drive and pulled into traffic. They drove north, away from the cramped streets where Poppy had spent her entire life, past the neighborhoods where laundry hung on fire escapes and corner stores had bars on the windows. The buildings grew taller, cleaner. The sidewalks widened. Trees appeared, actual trees, not the half-dead sticks she was used to. Then they left the city entirely. The highway stretched into suburbs that looked like movie sets. Mansion after mansion hidden behind gates and walls, their lawns so green they didn't look real. Poppy pressed her face to the window and watched wealth scroll past like a slideshow of another planet. 20 minutes later, the car slowed. They turned onto a private road. No sign, no mailbox. Just a gap in a stone wall that looked like it had been standing since before Chicago existed. The road curved through trees for half a mile before the house appeared. Calling it a house was like calling the ocean a puddle. The mansion sprawled across the landscape in cold gray stone and iron. 3 stories of windows that reflected nothing, a circular driveway centered on a fountain that wasn't running. The architecture was brutal, angular, the kind of building that looked like it had been designed to withstand a siege. Every window was dark. The car stopped at the front entrance. The driver finally spoke. "Leave your things. Someone will bring them to your room." Poppy climbed out with Dirt's carrier clutched against her chest. Her sneakers crunched on gravel that looked like it had been raked into perfect lines. The fountain in the center of the drive was bone dry, filled with dead leaves and what might have been a bird's nest. The front door opened before she could knock. A woman stood there. 60-something, silver hair pulled into a bun so tight it looked painful, wearing a black dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral that never ended. "Miss Vale," her voice was clipped, British accent, the kind that made every word sound like an insult. "I'm Mrs. Chen. I manage the household. You'll follow me." She turned and walked into the house without waiting for an answer. Poppy followed. The interior was worse than the outside. Everything was marble. White marble floors, white marble columns, a staircase that swept upward like something from a museum. But there was no warmth to it, no color. The walls were bare except for a few pieces of art that looked expensive and cold, abstract paintings in gray and black, a sculpture of something twisted and sharp near the entrance. It felt like walking into a mausoleum. Mrs. Chen's heels clicked against the floor as she moved through the space, not looking back to see if Poppy was keeping up. "Mr. Valieri is in a meeting. He'll see you this evening. Your quarters are on the 3rd floor, east wing. Meals are served at 7 a.m., noon, and 7 p.m. in the staff dining room. You are not to enter Mr. Valieri's private study, his bedroom, or the west wing under any circumstances. Is that clear?" Is that clear?" Yes. They climbed the staircase. Poppy's legs burned. Dirt had gone silent in his carrier, which was somehow worse than the yowling. The 3rd-floor hallway stretched in both directions, lined with closed doors. Mrs. Chen stopped at one near the end. "This is yours." The room inside was bigger than Poppy's entire apartment had been. A bed with white sheets that looked like they'd never been slept in. A dresser. A window overlooking the grounds. And nothing else. No pictures. No decoration. Just empty space waiting to be filled with someone's life. "Someone will collect you for dinner," Mrs. Chen said. "Don't be late." Then she left. Then she sheet. Poppy set Dirt's carrier on the floor and opened it. The cat shot out like he'd been launched from a cannon, disappeared under the bed, and refused to come out no matter how much she coaxed. She didn't blame him. She sat on the edge of the mattress and stared at the window. Through the glass, she could see the grounds stretching away from the house. What should have been a lawn was just dead grass and bare earth, trees that needed pruning, flower beds choked with weeds. And beyond that, half hidden behind a wall of overgrown hedges, she could see the outline of something else, a garden, or what used to be one. Dinner was served in a room that could have seated 40 people but held only one. Dante sat at the head of a table long enough to land a plane on, eating what looked like steak and roasted vegetables with the kind of precise mechanical movements that made Poppy think of a machine pretending to be human. He didn't look up when she entered. "Sit," he said. There was a place setting directly across from him. Miles of polished wood separated them. Poppy walked the length of the table and sat down, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. A man in a white jacket appeared from nowhere, set a plate in front of her, and vanished just as quickly. She stared at the food. It looked better than anything she'd eaten in months. "Eat," Dante said. "I'm not hungry." "Yes, you are." He was right. Her stomach had been eating itself since yesterday. But something about the way he sat there, calm, controlled, like he was conducting an experiment, made her want to refuse just to spite him. She picked up her fork. The steak was perfect, tender enough to fall apart, seasoned in a way that made her want to weep. She ate 3 bites before she couldn't help herself. "Why is everything in this house dead?" Dante's knife paused halfway through cutting his meat. He looked up, those gray eyes fixed on her with the same empty intensity she remembered from the cathedral. "Excuse me?" "The fountain doesn't work. The lawn is dying. That garden outside looks like it hasn't been touched in years. You live in a mansion, but it feels like a—" She stopped herself. "Like a what?" he asked quietly. "Nothing." "Say it." "A tomb," Poppy finished. "It feels like a tomb." Silence dropped over the room like a physical weight. Dante set down his knife and fork, aligned them perfectly parallel on the edge of his plate. When he looked at her again, his expression hadn't changed, but something in the air shifted. "My mother designed those gardens," he said. His voice was soft. too soft. She spent 20 years building them. Roses from Italy, lavender from France, a greenhouse full of orchids that took a decade to cultivate. Poppy's throat went dry. She died 7 years ago, Dante continued. Heart attack. Right there in the garden, face down in the soil she loved more than anything else in her life. He picked up his wine glass. Took a slow sip. I had everything torn out the next day. Poppy's fork clattered against her plate. Why? Because she's dead. And dead things don't need gardens. That's not... What? His voice turned sharp. Not what? Not healthy? Not normal? You think I don't know that? She swallowed hard. I think you buried more than just your mother. Dante stood. The motion was sudden enough that Poppy flinched, but he didn't move toward her. Just stood there at the head of the table, his hands braced on the wood, staring down at her like he was trying to decide whether to throw her out or break her neck. You're here to fix the grounds, he said finally. Not me. Stay in your lane, flower girl. Then he walked out. Poppy sat alone in the enormous dining room, her food growing cold, her pulse hammering in her ears. And she realized something that made her stomach turn. She wasn't an employee. She was a decoration, something he'd brought in to fill the empty spaces in his house without actually having to feel them. She didn't sleep that night either. At some point near 3 a.m., she gave up trying, pulled on her jacket, and slipped out of her room. The house was silent. No creaking, no settling, just the kind of heavy quiet that made every footstep sound like a gunshot. She found her way downstairs, through the kitchen, and out the back door. The grounds were worse up close. What should have been a lawn was patchy and dead. Flower beds were choked with weeds tall enough to reach her waist. A stone path led toward the area she'd seen from her window, the abandoned garden, but it was barely visible beneath years of neglect. Poppy followed it anyway. The garden was surrounded by a brick wall covered in dead ivy. The gate hung crooked on its hinges, rusted shut. She had to put her shoulder into it to force it open. Inside was devastation. Raised beds full of soil that had turned to dust. Trellises collapsed under the weight of dead vines. A greenhouse with half its glass panels shattered. And in the center, a stone fountain, dry, cracked, filled with debris. But beneath the death, she could see the bones of what it had been. The layout. The careful arrangement of beds. The way the paths curved to create little pockets of space. Someone had loved this place, poured their life into it, and then someone else had let it die out of spite. Poppy knelt in the dirt beside one of the raised beds, ran her fingers through the soil. It was still good underneath, still rich, still waiting. You shouldn't be here. She jerked upright. Dante stood in the gateway, wearing sweatpants and nothing else. His chest was bare, scarred, a line across his ribs that looked like it had been made with a knife, another near his shoulder, a third across his abdomen. He looked like a map of violence. I couldn't sleep, Poppy said. So you decided to trespass. You told me to fix the grounds. I told you to stay away from the garden. No, you didn't. His jaw tightened. I'm telling you now. Why? She stood, brushing dirt off her knees. Because your mother loved it? Because you can't stand the idea of it being alive again? Because it's none of your goddamn business. You made it my business when you dragged me here. Dante moved into the garden, slow, deliberate, like a wolf closing distance on something cornered. I didn't drag you anywhere, he said quietly. You came willingly. Because you gave me no choice. There's always a choice. Starving isn't a choice. Isn't it? He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see his chest rising and falling with each breath. You could have walked away, found another job, another city, but you didn't. Because I had nothing left. Exactly. His voice dropped lower. You had nothing. No money, no prospects, no future. And I offered you all three. You offered me a cage. Then why haven't you left? The question hung in the air between them. Poppy's hands curled into fists. Because I'm an idiot. No. Dante stepped closer. Because you're curious, same as me. Curious about what? What happens next? He reached out, not to touch her, just to brush his fingers against a strand of dead ivy hanging from the nearest trellis. The vine crumbled at his touch, turning to dust. I don't want this place fixed, he said. I know. Then why are you here? Because you do want it fixed. Poppy met his eyes. You just don't know how to admit it. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he turned and walked away. But as he reached the gate, he paused. Do whatever you want, he said without looking back. Just don't expect me to thank you for it. Oh. The next morning, Poppy went into the city. She took one of the cars from the garage, a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than her shop had been worth, and drove to a nursery on the south side that specialized in salvage and clearance plants. The kind of place where broke landscapers and determined gardeners went to find things that were still alive despite being unwanted. She filled the trunk with lavender starts, rose bushes that had been marked down for dead blooms, bags of compost, and a flat of pansies that looked half frozen but resilient. The woman at the register raised an eyebrow. Someone's ambitious. Someone's stupid, Poppy muttered. She drove back to the mansion, unloaded everything into the garden, and got to work. The first day she cleared weeds, the second day she repaired the raised beds, the third day she started planting. Dante never came to watch, but she could feel him. Sometimes she'd look up and see a curtain moving in an upstairs window, or she'd be on her knees in the dirt and hear footsteps on the path behind her, only to turn and find no one there. He was haunting his own house, and she was exorcising it, one flower at a time. 2 weeks in, Mrs. Chen stopped her in the hallway. Mr. Villieri wants to see you. Poppy's stomach dropped. When? Now. She followed the housekeeper to the study, a room she'd been explicitly told to avoid. Mrs. Chen knocked twice, then opened the door and gestured for Poppy to enter. The study was darker than the rest of the house. Wood-paneled walls, heavy furniture, a desk covered in papers, and a laptop that looked out of place among the antique surroundings. Dante sat behind the desk, reading something on his phone. He didn't look up. Sit. Poppy sat in the chair across from him, her hands gripping her knees. He finished whatever he was reading, set the phone down, finally looked at her. You've been spending money. Her throat tightened. On supplies. For the garden. I noticed. You said I could. I'm not upset. He leaned back in his chair. I'm curious how you're planning to pay for it. You thought I'd just cover it? You cleared my debts. I assumed. Never assume. His voice stayed calm, but there was something underneath it, something sharp. Everything has a price, Poppy. Even charity. Her pulse kicked up. What do you want? Dinner. She blinked. What? Have dinner with me. Upstairs. Not in that mausoleum of a dining room. My private quarters. Why? Because I'm asking. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting. Poppy's mind raced. Every survival instinct she had left screamed at her to refuse, to stand up and walk out, to remember that this man was dangerous, that he'd bought her life like it was a commodity, that nothing he did came without strings attached. But she also thought about the garden, the plants she'd put in the ground, the way the soil had felt cool and alive in her hands for the first time in years. Fine, she said. When? Tonight, 8 o'clock. And if I say no, Dante smiled, that same cold smile. Then I cut off your funding, and you watch everything you planted die. She knocked on his door at 8 exactly. He answered wearing jeans and a black t-shirt that fit him in ways that should have been illegal. His hair was still damp from a shower. He looked younger like this, less like a mob boss and more like a man who could have been normal in another life. Come in. His quarters were nothing like the rest of the house. The walls were painted a deep blue gray. Actual furniture, comfortable furniture, sat arranged around a fireplace that was burning. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed with worn spines. A kitchen area in the corner had a table set for two. It looked lived in. Human. You cook? Poppy asked. Sometimes. He moved to the stove where something was simmering in a pan. When I don't want to be bothered. You could have had someone make this. I could have. But then you'd spend the whole meal wondering if it was poisoned. She couldn't tell if he was joking. He served pasta. Something simple with olive oil, garlic, and herbs. They sat across from each other at the small table, and for a few minutes neither of them spoke. Then Dante set down his fork. "Why flowers?" Poppy looked up. "What? Why did you choose flowers, of all the things you could have done with your life?" She thought about lying, giving him something easy and surface level, but something about the way he was looking at her, genuinely curious without the usual predatory edge, made her tell the truth. "My mother was sick for a long time," she said quietly. "Cancer. We couldn't afford treatment, couldn't afford anything, really, but she loved flowers, said they were the only things that made the apartment feel less like a prison." She picked at her pasta. "Before she died, she made me promise I'd keep the shop open. Said it was the only thing in our family that ever grew instead of falling apart." Poppy's voice cracked. "So I did. And I failed at it anyway." Dante didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, "You didn't fail. I lost everything." "No, you survived long enough for someone to notice." "Lucky me. Luck had nothing to do with it." He stood, picked up their plates, and carried them to the sink. Poppy watched him move through the space. Efficient, practiced, like he'd done this 1,000 times. "My mother died in that garden," Dante said, his back still turned. "But that's not why I tore it out." Poppy waited. "I tore it out because every time I looked at it, I saw her. And I couldn't—" His hands gripped the edge of the sink. "I couldn't stand it. The idea that something she loved was still here and she wasn't." He turned around, leaned against the counter. "I thought if I got rid of it, I'd stop feeling it. The grief, the rage, all of it. But it didn't work. It just made everything worse." Poppy's chest ached. "Then why won't you let me fix it?" "Because I don't deserve it fixed. That's not how gardens work." "What do you mean?" "Gardens don't care what you deserve. They just grow, or they don't. The only thing that matters is whether you're willing to put your hands in the dirt." Dante stared at her. Something shifted in his expression, something she couldn't name. Then he crossed the space between them in 3 strides, pulled her to her feet, and kissed her. It wasn't gentle. His hands fisted in her hair. His mouth was hard and desperate and tasted like wine. Poppy's mind went blank. She grabbed his shirt to steady herself, to push him away, to pull him closer, she didn't know which. He broke the kiss just as suddenly, stepped back. His chest heaved. "Get out," he said hoarsely. "What?" "Get out, now, before I do something we'll both regret." Poppy's legs barely held her. She stumbled toward the door, her lips still burning, her pulse screaming in her ears. She made it into the hallway before she heard him punch the wall behind her. The sound echoed through the empty house like a gunshot. She avoided him for 3 days after that. Stayed in the garden from dawn until dark. Her hands raw and blistered, her body aching. She didn't go to meals, didn't answer when Mrs. Chen knocked on her door, just worked until she collapsed into bed too exhausted to think. On the 4th day, she found a package waiting outside her room. Inside was a pair of gardening gloves. Expensive ones. The kind professionals used. No note. She put them on and went back to work. That afternoon, while she was replanting a section of the rose bed, she heard voices. Male voices. Angry. She looked up. Through the broken slats of the greenhouse, she could see 2 men standing near the house. One was Dante. The other was someone she didn't recognize. Older, silver-haired, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her car. Their body language was wrong, tense. Dante's hands were in fists. The other man was pointing at him, his face red. Then the older man grabbed Dante's arm, and Dante moved, fast, brutal. He twisted the man's wrist, forced him to his knees, and held him there for 3 seconds before letting go. The older man scrambled backward, shouted something Poppy couldn't hear, and stalked away toward a waiting car. Dante stood there alone, his shoulders heaving, his fists still clenched. Then he looked directly at the greenhouse, at her. Their eyes met through the broken glass, and Poppy realized something that made her blood run cold. He'd known she was watching, the whole time. That night, someone knocked on her door at midnight. Poppy opened it to find one of Dante's guards, a man she'd seen around the house but never spoken to. "Boss wants you downstairs," he said. "Now?" "Now." She followed him through the dark house, down to the 1st floor, through a door she'd never noticed before. It led to a basement. The air smelled like concrete and something metallic. The guard opened another door at the bottom of the stairs and gestured for her to enter. Inside was Dante. He sat in a chair in the middle of an empty room, his shirt off, his hands covered in blood. Poppy's breath stopped. "Close the door," he said quietly. She did. "What happened?" "Business." "Are you hurt?" "No." "Then whose blood? Does it matter?" She stared at him, at the blood on his hands, at the cold, empty expression on his face. "Yes," she whispered. "It matters." Dante stood, walked to a sink in the corner and started washing his hands. The water ran red. "You want to know who I am?" he asked. His voice was flat. "This is who I am. This is what I do." "I didn't ask. You've been here 3 weeks, acting like you can fix this place, acting like I'm some broken thing you can repair with enough flowers and determination." He turned to face her, water still dripping from his hands. "But I'm not broken. I'm exactly what I'm supposed to be. A murderer." "Yes." The word hung between them. Poppy's hands trembled. "Did you kill someone tonight?" "Does it matter?" "Stop saying that." "Why?" "Because you want me to be something I'm not? Because you've built some fantasy in your head where I'm secretly a good man under all this?" "No." Her voice cracked. "Because I need to know if I'm in danger." Dante laughed. It was the worst sound she'd ever heard. "You've been in danger since the moment you walked into that cathedral," he said. "You just didn't want to see it." He crossed the room, stopped inches away from her. "Here's the truth, Flower Girl. I killed Angelo Scarpari. I planned it for 6 months. Made sure the bomb in his car would kill him instantly so he wouldn't suffer, because even I have limits. And I did it because he was threatening my territory, my people, my business." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And I'd do it again, tonight, tomorrow, 100 times over, because that's who I am." Poppy's vision blurred. "Then why did you bring me here?" "Because for one moment in that cathedral, when you stood there covered in glitter and shame, you made me feel like maybe there was something in this world that wasn't already covered in blood." He reached out, brushed his thumb across her cheek, leaving a faint smear of dampness. "But I was wrong," Dante said. "Everything I touch dies, including you." Then he walked past her, out of the room, and left her standing alone in the basement, with blood still drying in the sink, and the truth sitting in her chest like a stone. She didn't leave that night, or the next, but every hour she stayed, she felt the ground shifting beneath her, felt the door closing, the trap tightening, and she knew, with the horrible certainty of someone watching their own execution, that she'd already crossed a line she could never uncross. 3 days later, Poppy woke to the smell of smoke. She ran to her window and looked out at the grounds. The garden wasn't on fire, but beyond the walls, past the trees, she could see flames lighting up the sky. Orange, enormous, close enough to feel like the air itself was burning. She grabbed her phone, pulled up the news. The headline hit her like a punch to the throat. "Flower shop destroyed in suspected arson. Vale blooms burns to ground." Beneath it was a photo. Her shop, or what was left of it, just blackened walls and ash. And in the rubble, barely visible in the photo, she could see something small and dark and still. Dirt. Her cat. Burned. Dead. The phone fell from her hands. She didn't scream, didn't cry, just stood there in her room in Dante Valieri's mansion, staring at the smoke rising in the distance, while something inside her shattered completely. Someone knocked on her door. She opened it. Dante stood there, still wearing yesterday's clothes, his eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said. And Poppy understood. He hadn't done this, but he'd known it would happen. Known the Scarpari family, what was left of them, would come for anything connected to him, and he'd let her stay anyway. "Get out," she whispered. "Poppy, get out." He didn't move, so she slammed the door in his face, and finally, alone in her beautiful white room, in her beautiful, terrible prison, Poppy Vale broke. She slid down the wall, pulled her knees to her chest, and sobbed until her throat was raw and her body was empty. Because now she knew the truth. She wasn't his employee, she wasn't his decoration. She was his collateral damage. And there was no way out that didn't end with her dead too. Poppy didn't leave her room for 2 days. She lay on the white sheets in the white room and stared at the white ceiling until the color started to feel like it was eating her alive. Mrs. Chen brought food that went untouched. The maids knocked softly and received no answer. Somewhere in the house, life continued. Doors opened and closed, voices murmured, the world kept turning. But Poppy had stopped with it. Dirt was dead. Her shop was ash, and she was trapped in a mansion with the man who'd let it all happen. On the third morning, she finally moved. Not because she wanted to, because her body started to rebel against stillness. Her muscles ached, her head throbbed, and beneath the grief, something else had started to grow. Rage. She got dressed, pulled on jeans and a shirt that smelled like soil from the last time she'd worn it. Her reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger. Hollow eyes, chapped lips, hair she hadn't bothered to brush. She looked like someone who'd already died and hadn't noticed yet. Good. She walked downstairs through the marble tomb, past the guards who pretended not to watch her, down the hallway toward Dante's study. The door was closed. She didn't knock. Inside, Dante sat at his desk with Marco standing beside him. Both men looked up when she entered. Marco's hand moved toward his jacket, toward whatever weapon he kept there, but Dante held up one finger and the guard went still. "Leave us," Dante said quietly. Marco hesitated. "Boss, out." The guard left. The door clicked shut behind him. Dante leaned back in his chair. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes. His shirt was wrinkled like he'd slept in it. "You should be resting," he said. "You should be dead." His expression didn't change. "Probably." "They killed my cat." "I know." "They burned down everything I had left." "I know." "And you let it happen." "No." He stood slowly. "I tried to prevent it. I had men watching the shop, but the Scarparis moved faster than I expected. By the time my people got there, Dirt was already dead." The words came out flat, empty. Dante's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Was he the only one?" "What? Was my cat the only thing that died in that fire? Or was there someone else? Some person who was in the wrong place at the wrong time because you decided I was worth keeping around?" "There was no one else." "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Poppy walked closer, stopped on the opposite side of his desk, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into his face, close enough to smell the coffee going cold in the mug beside his laptop. "I want to leave," she said. "No." That wasn't a request, and it wasn't a negotiation. He met her eyes. "You leave this house, you're dead within a week, maybe less." "Then let me die." "No." "Why?" Her voice cracked. "Why do you care? You got what you wanted. You cleared my debts. You brought me here. You watched me plant flowers in your dead mother's garden like some kind of pet project. What else is there?" Dante moved around the desk, fast. Before she could step back, he was there, his hands gripping her shoulders, his face inches from hers. "You think I wanted this?" His voice was low, dangerous. "You think I planned for you to lose everything? Didn't you?" "No, I thought—" He stopped, his grip loosened. "I thought I could protect you." "From what? From you?" "From them. From my world. From everything that comes with being near me." "Well, you failed." "I know. So let me go." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because you're already marked." His hands dropped. He stepped back, ran both hands through his hair in a gesture that looked like it hurt. "The Scarparis know who you are now. They know you're connected to me, and they won't stop until they've used you to hurt me or killed you trying." Poppy's chest constricted. "Then what am I supposed to do? Stay here forever? Become another piece of furniture in your mausoleum? You're supposed to survive. That's not living." "No." He turned away, walked to the window overlooking the grounds. "But it's better than the alternative." She stared at his back, at the tension in his shoulders, at the way he stood like he was holding up the weight of the house itself. And something inside her shifted, not softening, not forgiveness, understanding. He was as trapped as she was, just in a different kind of cage. "I'm going back to the garden," Poppy said. "Why?" "Because it's the only thing in this place that isn't already dead." She walked out before he could respond. The garden had grown in her absence. Not much, but enough. The lavender had started to spread. The roses showed new growth. The pansies she'd planted near the fountain had opened their faces toward the weak spring sun. It wasn't beautiful yet, but it was trying. Poppy knelt in the dirt beside the rose bed and started pulling weeds. Her hands moved on autopilot. Grab, yank, toss, grab, yank, toss. The rhythm was meditative, hypnotic. It was the only thing that kept her from screaming. She worked until her back ached, until her knees were caked with mud, until the sun started to set and the temperature dropped enough to make her breath fog. Then she heard footsteps on the path. She didn't look up. "I'm not leaving," she said. "I know." Dante's voice came from somewhere behind her. "I brought you something." She turned. He stood at the edge of the garden holding a small cardboard box. His expression was unreadable. "What is it?" she asked. "Open it." She stood, wiped her hands on her jeans, took the box. Inside was a kitten, orange and white, tiny, maybe 8 weeks old. It looked up at her with enormous blue eyes and let out a pitiful mew. Poppy's throat closed. "Her name's Marigold," Dante said quietly. "At least that's what the shelter called her. You can change it if you want." "Why?" "Because you lost Dirt, and I can't bring him back, but I can give you this." She stared down at the kitten, at its 2 big ears and needle claws, at the way it climbed up the side of the box trying to reach her. "This doesn't fix anything," Poppy whispered. "I know. It doesn't make us even." "I know that too." She lifted the kitten out of the box. It was warm and soft, and so small she was afraid she'd break it just by holding it wrong. It purred immediately, a sound like a tiny motor. Poppy's eyes burned. "I hate you," she said. "I know. I mean it. I hate everything about you. What you do, what you are. The fact that I'm stuck here because of you." "I know." "Then why are you still standing here?" Dante looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she didn't expect. He smiled. Not the cold smile, not the empty one. A real smile. Small and tired and almost human. "Because hating me means you're still alive," he said. "And that's more than I deserve." Then he turned and walked back toward the house. Poppy stood alone in the garden, holding the kitten against her chest, feeling it purr against her heartbeat. And for the first time since the fire, she cried. Not from grief, from something worse. Relief. Job. 3 weeks passed. Poppy fell into a routine. Wake at dawn. Feed Marigold. Work in the garden until her body gave out. Eat meals in her room, sleep badly, repeat. Dante left her alone. Mostly. Sometimes she'd find things waiting for her. A new pair of gloves, seeds for vegetables she'd mentioned wanting to plant. A book about heritage roses that looked like it had cost more than her first car. No notes, no explanations. Just gifts left like offerings. She didn't thank him, but she didn't refuse them either. The garden grew. Slowly. Stubbornly. The roses bloomed in shades of pink and white and deep crimson. The lavender filled the air with scent. She repaired the greenhouse piece by piece, replacing the broken glass panels with salvaged windows she found in the estate's storage building. It was starting to look like something worth saving, and so was she. One evening, while she was transplanting seedlings in the greenhouse, Dante appeared in the doorway. She'd been expecting him, dreading him. "We need to talk," he said. "About what?" "About what happens next." Poppy set down her trowel, wiped dirt on her jeans. "I'm listening." He stepped inside. The greenhouse was small enough that his presence filled it, made the air feel thicker. "The Scarparis aren't done," he said. "They've been quiet. Too quiet. My people have been watching their movements, and everything points to them planning something big. Against you? Against us." The word hung between them. Us. Like they were a unit, a team, something more than captor and prisoner. "What do they want?" Poppy asked. "Blood, mine preferably, but they'll settle for anyone close to me. I'm not close to you." "They don't know that." "Then tell them." "It's too late." He moved closer, stopped beside the workbench where she'd been potting plants. "They've already decided you matter. That makes you a target. And the only way to protect you is to what? Lock me in this house forever? To make them think you're not worth the effort. And how do we do that? Dante's expression hardened. By making you disappear. Her blood went cold. What? Not literally, but publicly. I stage your death. Make it look like the Scarpari's already got to you. Bury an empty casket. Make sure the whole city knows you're gone. And then what? I hide here for the rest of my life? For a while. Until things cool down. Until I can eliminate the threat completely. Poppy laughed. The sound was bitter enough to taste. You're insane. I'm practical. You're asking me to erase myself. I'm asking you to stay alive. By becoming a ghost. Yes. She turned away from him, stared out through the repaired greenhouse glass at the garden beyond, at the life she'd built from death. What if I say no? She asked. Then I keep you locked in this house until you change your mind. That's not a choice. No. His voice softened. But it's the only one I can give you. Poppy's hands curled into fists. I need time to think. You have until tomorrow. That's not enough. It's all we have. He started to leave, but at the doorway, he paused. For what it's worth, Dante said quietly, I'm sorry. For all of it. For the cathedral. For bringing you here. For everything you've lost because of me. Sorry doesn't bring dirt back. I know. And it doesn't fix the fact that you're a murderer. I know that too. Then why say it at all? He looked back at her, and for just a moment she saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Regret. Because you deserve to hear it, he said, even if it changes nothing. Then he was gone. Poppy stood alone in the greenhouse, surrounded by the smell of soil and growing things, and tried to decide whether survival was worth the cost of disappearing. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat in her room with Marigold curled in her lap and stared at her phone. At the photos she still had saved. Her mother. The shop. Dirt sitting in a sunbeam, all gone. All ash. At some point near 3 a.m., she opened her email. There was one new message. The sender's address was a string of random numbers and letters. No name. No subject line. She should have deleted it. Instead, she opened it. Inside was a single sentence. If you want the truth about your mother's death, meet me at the corner of Lake and Dearborn tomorrow at noon. Come alone. Poppy's hands started shaking. Her mother had died from cancer. That was the truth. The only truth. Wasn't it? She read the email again. Then she deleted it. But the words stayed burned in her mind. The next morning she told Mrs. Chen she needed to go into the city. Mr. Valieri has forbidden you from leaving the estate, the housekeeper said. Then he can tell me himself. She found Dante in his study. He looked up when she entered, his expression already wary. I need to go into Chicago, Poppy said. Today. No. It's not a request. And it's not a negotiation. Someone contacted me. They said... She stopped. The words felt impossible. They said they have information about my mother. Dante's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes went very still. What kind of information? About her death. Your mother died from cancer. That's what I thought too. Then why would someone... He stood abruptly. Show me the email. I deleted it. Why? Because I didn't want you to see it. His jaw tightened. Poppy. This is a trap. Maybe. Definitely. The Scarparis are baiting you. Trying to get you out of the house so they can... So they can what? Kill me? I'm already dead here. What's the difference? The difference is I can protect you here. You can't protect me from the truth. There is no truth. Your mother died 7 years ago from cancer. That's the end of it. Then why are you so afraid of me going? Dante moved around the desk. Fast. He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. Because if something happens to you, He stopped. His hands dropped. I can't lose you too. The words hit her like cold water, too. Like she was something he'd already claimed, already owned, already couldn't live without. You don't have me, Poppy said quietly. Don't I? They stared at each other, and in that moment she saw it. The truth he'd been hiding beneath all the control and violence and careful distance. He wasn't keeping her here to protect his reputation. He was keeping her here because he'd already fallen, and he didn't know how to stop. "I'm going," Poppy said, "with or without your permission." "Then I'm coming with you." "No." "Yes." "The email said to come alone." "And you believed it?" "I'm willing to risk it." "Well, I'm not." She pulled away from him, stepped back, put distance between them that felt like miles. "You don't get to decide this," she said. "You've decided everything else, where I live, what I do, whether I'm allowed to exist outside these walls, but you don't get to decide this." Dante's expression went cold. "Then you're a fool." "Maybe, but at least I'll die knowing the truth." "You'll die because you're too stubborn to see a trap when it's right in front of you. Or maybe I'll live because I'm finally making my own choice." She turned and walked out. Behind her, she heard something crash, something heavy and breakable. But she didn't look back. She took the same black sedan she'd used weeks ago. The driver, a different guard this time, younger, less scarred, didn't speak during the drive into the city, just watched her in the rearview mirror like she was a bomb waiting to explode. Chicago looked different in daylight, brighter, louder, full of people living their lives without knowing they were walking past someone who'd already died twice. The car stopped 2 blocks from the corner of Lake and Dearborn. "I'll wait here," the driver said. "You'll leave." Boss said, "I don't care what he said. If you follow me, whoever I'm meeting won't show." The driver's jaw worked. "He'll kill me if something happens to you." "Then I guess you better hope nothing does." She got out of the car before he could argue. The corner was busy. Lunch crowds poured out of office buildings. Food trucks lined the curb. Poppy stood beside a coffee shop, scanning faces, looking for anyone who looked like they were looking for her. 5 minutes passed, then 10. She was about to leave when someone sat down on the bench beside her. A woman, 50s. Graying hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing a nurse's uniform with a coffee-stained jacket over it. "Poppy Vale?" the woman asked. "Who's asking?" "Someone who knew your mother." Poppy's pulse kicked. "What's your name?" "Doesn't matter." "It does to me." The woman sighed. "Carol, I was a hospice nurse at Mercy General. I worked your mother's last month." The words brought back memories Poppy had spent years trying to bury. The hospital smell, the monitors beeping, the way her mother's hand had felt like paper in hers. "Why did you contact me?" Poppy asked. Carol looked around, nervous, like she expected someone to be watching. "Because I've been carrying something for 7 years, she said quietly, "and I can't carry it anymore." "Carry what?" "The truth about what killed your mother." Poppy's chest tightened. "It was cancer." "No, it wasn't." The world tilted. "What are you talking about?" Carol reached into her bag, pulled out a manila envelope, handed it to Poppy with shaking hands. "Your mother came to Mercy General with stage 3 pancreatic cancer," she said. "That part's true. But she was responding to treatment. The doctors were optimistic. Said she had at least 2 more years. Maybe more." "Then what?" "Then someone paid the hospital to change her medication." The envelope felt like it was burning Poppy's hands. "What?" "Someone switched her pain medication to something else. Something that accelerated the cancer. Made it spread faster. Made her pain worse. Made sure she'd die within weeks instead of years." Poppy's vision blurred. "Who?" "I don't know his name, but I saw him. Came to the hospital 3 times, talked to the head of oncology in private, always wore expensive suits, always left cash." "What did he look like?" Carol's hands twisted in her lap. "Tall, dark hair, gray eyes." She looked at Poppy. "Young. Maybe 30 at the time." The world stopped. "No, no, 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 no." "You're lying," Poppy whispered. "I wish I was. Why would he?" "I don't know, but after your mother died, I tried to report it. Went to the police. They told me there was no evidence, that I was mistaken, that I should drop it before I lost my license." Carol stood. "I kept records anyway. Copies of the medication changes, photos of the man who visited, dates and times. It's all in there." She gestured to the envelope. I don't know what you'll do with it, but you deserve to know. Wait, but Carol was already walking away, disappearing into the lunch crowd like she'd never existed. Poppy sat frozen on the bench, holding the envelope, unable to make her hands move. Slowly, so slowly it felt like moving through concrete, she opened it. Inside were medical records, photocopies, highlighted sections showing medication changes that didn't make sense. Notes in handwriting she didn't recognize, and at the bottom, a photograph. Grainy, taken from a distance but unmistakable. Dante Valieri, 7 years younger, standing in a hospital hallway, talking to a doctor, handing him money. The envelope fell from Poppy's hands, paper scattered across the sidewalk. People walked past without stopping, without seeing, without knowing that the woman on the bench had just watched her entire reality crack open. Dante had killed her mother. Not directly, but deliberately, methodically. And he'd brought Poppy into his house knowing exactly what he'd done. Her phone rang. She looked at the screen. Dante. She answered. Where are you? His voice was tight, controlled. The driver said you sent him away. I know what you did. Silence. Poppy, my mother, 7 years ago, Mercy General. More silence, then quietly. Come home. That's not my home. Come back. Let me explain. There's nothing to explain. You killed her. It wasn't. You murdered my mother. While I was sitting beside her bed holding her hand and watching her die, you were the reason she was dying. Poppy, please. Why? Her voice cracked, shattered. Why would you do that? What did she ever do to you? She knew something about my family, about business. She was going to... He stopped. It doesn't matter now. It matters to me. Then come back, and I'll tell you everything. So you can kill me too? I would never... You already did. Tears streamed down her face. You killed me the day you killed her. I just didn't know it yet. She hung up. The phone rang again immediately. She turned it off. Then she started walking. She didn't know where she was going. Just away. Away from the corner, away from the paper scattered on the sidewalk. Away from the truth that was eating her alive from the inside. She walked for an hour, maybe more, until she found herself standing outside what used to be Vale Blooms. The building was still there, blackened, gutted, yellow caution tape across the entrance. She ducked under the tape and stepped inside. The smell hit her first. Smoke and ash and something chemical. The ceiling had partially collapsed. The walls were charred black. And in the corner where she used to keep Dirt's food bowl, there was still a small dark stain that might have been blood. Poppy sank to her knees in the ash and screamed. Not words, just sound, raw and animal, and full of 7 years of grief she'd been carrying without knowing why it weighed so much. She screamed until her throat was raw, until her voice gave out, until there was nothing left inside her but emptiness. Then she heard footsteps. She looked up. 3 men stood in the doorway. Not Dante's men. She would have recognized them. These were different, harder, meaner. The one in front smiled. Poppy Vale, he said. We've been looking for you. She tried to stand. Her legs wouldn't work. Who are you? Friends of Angelo Scarpari, here to collect what Valieri took from us. They moved closer. Poppy's hand closed around something in the ash. Something metal and sharp. Her grandmother's gardening shears. Somehow still here. Still whole. Stay back, she whispered. The men laughed, and Poppy realized with horrible clarity that she had 2 choices. Die here, in the ruins of everything she'd lost, or become something new, something that could survive what was coming. The first man reached for her. She drove the shears into his thigh. He screamed, fell backward. Blood sprayed across the charred walls. The other 2 froze. Poppy stood. Her hands were steady. The shears dripped red. I said stay back. They looked at each other, then they charged. And Poppy discovered something she'd never known about herself. She knew how to fight. Not well, not trained, but desperate and vicious and willing to do whatever it took to survive. She slashed, kicked, clawed, used the shears like a weapon because that's what they'd become. One man caught her wrist, twisted it until something cracked. The shears fell. She bit his hand until she tasted copper. He let go screaming. The second man grabbed her hair, yanked her head back. She saw his fist coming toward her face and couldn't move fast enough. The impact sent her sprawling into the ash. Her vision went white, then red, then dark at the edges. She heard voices, angry, arguing about whether to finish her here or take her somewhere else. Then she heard something else, gunshots. 3 of them. Sharp and final. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached. Someone knelt beside her. Hands, gentle hands, turned her over. Dante's face swam into focus above her, covered in ash, eyes wild. "You're alive," he breathed. Unfortunately. He pulled her against his chest, held her so tightly she couldn't breathe. "I'm sorry," he whispered into her hair. I'm sorry. You killed my mother. I know. I should kill you. I know." She pushed him away, looked at the bodies of the 3 men, all dead, all shot precisely in the head. "Why did you save me?" she asked. Dante's hands were still shaking. Blood covered his shirt, his face. "Because losing you would kill me," he said, "and I'm not ready to die yet." Poppy laughed. The sound was broken glass. "Then I guess we're both monsters now." She looked down at her hands, at the blood under her fingernails, at the way her broken wrist was already swelling, and she understood. There was no going back, no returning to who she'd been before the cathedral, before the mansion, before tonight. That Poppy Vale was dead. This one, the one covered in blood and ash and rage, was something else entirely. Something that could survive in Dante Valieri's world, because she'd finally learned the truth. In his world, you didn't stay alive by being good. You stayed alive by being willing to be worse than everyone hunting you. "Take me home," she said quietly. Dante's eyes widened. "What?" "You heard me. Take me back to the mansion. Poppy, and tomorrow you're going to tell me everything, every deal, every kill, every secret, because if I'm going to survive this, I need to know exactly what kind of monster I'm standing beside." She met his gaze. "And then you're going to teach me how to become one too." The drive back to the mansion was silent except for the sound of Poppy's breathing, shallow and ragged, each inhale scraping her throat raw. Her broken wrist throbbed in time with her pulse. Blood had dried in streaks across her arms. Ash clung to her hair. She looked like she'd crawled out of a grave. Maybe she had. Dante sat beside her in the back seat, his hand hovering near hers but not touching, like he was afraid she'd shatter if he made contact. His shirt was soaked through with blood that wasn't his. His jaw was locked so tight she could see the muscle jumping beneath the skin. Neither of them spoke. What was there to say? He'd murdered her mother. She'd stabbed a man with gardening shears. They'd crossed a line together that couldn't be uncrossed. When they pulled up to the mansion, Dante helped her out of the car with careful hands. She didn't pull away, didn't lean into him either, just let herself be guided up the steps and through the door like a puppet with cut strings. Mrs. Chen appeared in the entryway. Her eyes went wide when she saw the blood. "Call Dr. Reeves," Dante said quietly. "Tell him it's urgent." "Sir, should I—" "Now!" The housekeeper vanished. Dante led Poppy upstairs, not to her room, to his quarters. He sat her down on the edge of his bed and disappeared into the bathroom. She heard water running, cabinets opening and closing. He returned with a first aid kit and a wet towel. "Let me see your wrist." She held it out. The joint was swollen to twice its normal size. Purple bruises bloomed across the skin. Dante's hands were gentle as he examined it, professional, like he'd done this before. "It's broken," he said. "I know. Reeves will set it properly. Until then," he wrapped it carefully in gauze, fashioned a makeshift splint from medical tape, and 2 wooden tongue depressors from the kit. His fingers moved with precision, no wasted motion. When he finished, he picked up the wet towel and started cleaning the blood from her arms. Poppy watched him work. Watched the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the way his hands trembled slightly despite the steadiness of his movements. "You're good at this," she said. Her voice came out hoarse. "I've had practice." "On yourself?" "Among others." He moved to her face, wiped away ash and dried blood with careful strokes. "Why did you do it?" Poppy asked. Dante's hand paused. "Do what?" "Kill my mother." The towel dropped. He sat back. looked at her with those empty gray eyes. "Your mother worked as a bookkeeper for one of my shell companies," he said quietly. "She was good at her job. Too good. She started noticing discrepancies, money moving through accounts that shouldn't exist. She came to me about it, said she was going to report it to the authorities if I didn't explain." "So you killed her?" "So I panicked." His voice was flat, dead. "I was 29, still new to running things, still trying to prove I was as ruthless as my father, and I made a choice. To murder a woman dying of cancer. To protect my empire." He met her gaze. "I told myself it was mercy, that she was dying anyway, that I was just speeding up the inevitable. But the truth is simpler than that." "What's the truth?" "I was a coward, and she paid for it." Poppy's chest ached, not from grief, from rage so deep it felt like drowning. "If you knew," she said slowly, "why did you bring me here? Why not just let me starve? Why care at all?" "Because—" He stopped, swallowed. "Because the day you fell in that cathedral, covered in glitter and shame, you reminded me of her." "Of my mother?" "Of the person I used to be before I became this." He gestured at himself, at the blood, at the mansion around them. "You were chaos, unlucky, fighting anyway, and I thought—" His voice cracked. "I thought maybe if I could save you, it would balance what I did to her." "That's insane." "I know. That's not how redemption works." "I know that too." Poppy laughed. The sound was broken, wrong. "You can't save me," she said. "I'm already dead. You just haven't buried me yet." "Then we're both ghosts." "No." She reached out with her good hand, grabbed his jaw, forced him to look at her. "You're a monster, and now I'm becoming one too." Dante's eyes widened. "Good," he whispered. Then he kissed her, not gentle, not asking permission, just desperate and hungry and tasting like violence. Poppy kissed him back with the same fury. Her good hand fisted in his hair, her broken wrist pressed between them, the pain sharp and clarifying. She bit his lip hard enough to draw blood, and he made a sound that was half growl, half surrender. They broke apart, gasping. "This doesn't fix anything," Poppy said. "I know." "I still hate you." "I know. And when this is over, I might kill you myself." "I'm counting on it." He kissed her again, slower this time, like he was trying to memorize the shape of her mouth, the taste of her rage. A knock at the door interrupted them. "Dr. Reeves is here," Mrs. Chen called. Dante pulled back. His lips were swollen, blood smeared across his chin from where she'd bitten him. "Come in," he said. The doctor was a thin man in his 60s with steady hands and eyes that had seen too much. He examined Poppy's wrist without asking questions, reset the bone with efficient brutality that made her vision white out, wrapped it in a proper cast. "Keep it elevated," he said. "No heavy lifting for 6 weeks." "What if I don't have 6 weeks?" Poppy asked. Dr. Reeves looked at Dante, then back at her. "Then you'll lose the use of your hand permanently. Your choice." He packed up his kit and left. Alone again, Poppy flexed her fingers. They moved. Barely. The cast was heavy and awkward and made her want to scream. "You should rest," Dante said. "I should learn how to shoot." He went very still. "What?" "You heard me. If I'm going to survive in your world, I need to know how to kill people who try to kill me." "Poppy, don't." She stood. Her legs were shaky but held. "You said I belonged to you, that I was yours, that you'd protect me. But tonight proved that's a lie. You can't be everywhere, and the Scarparis won't stop. I'll handle them." "How? By killing more of them? By starting a war that never ends?" She moved closer. "Or by teaching me how to stand beside you when they come?" Dante's expression was unreadable. Then he opened a drawer in his nightstand, pulled out a gun, set it on the bed between them. "Tomorrow," he said. "We start tomorrow." They didn't sleep. Poppy lay in Dante's bed wearing one of his shirts, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the gun still sitting on the nightstand. Dante sat in a chair by the window, watching the grounds like he expected an army to appear. Near dawn, he finally spoke. "They'll come soon." The Scarparis? What's left of them? I killed their lieutenants tonight. That leaves Marco Scarpari, Angelo's nephew. He's young, reckless, and he'll want revenge. How many men does he have? Enough. Dante rubbed his face. My people are watching his movements, but he's smart. He'll wait until we're vulnerable. Then he'll strike fast. How long? Days? Maybe less. Poppy sat up. Then we don't wait. We go to him first. That's suicide. So is sitting here waiting to be slaughtered. You don't know what you're saying, don't I? She swung her legs off the bed, walked to where he sat. You want me to be something other than a victim? Then treat me like I'm capable of making my own choices. Dante looked up at her, exhausted, raw. If we do this, he said quietly, there's no going back, you understand that? I crossed that line the moment I picked up those shears. This is different. How? Because tonight you acted in self-defense. What I'm talking about is premeditated, calculated murder in cold blood. Good. Her voice didn't waver. Then teach me how to do it right. And they started in the basement. The same basement where Dante had shown her his blood-stained hands weeks ago. But now the space looked different, cleared. A shooting range set up against one wall with targets and sandbags. A weapons rack holding an arsenal that made Poppy's stomach turn. Dante handed her the gun from his nightstand. A compact pistol, black metal, heavier than it looked. Glock 19, he said, 9mm, 15 rounds, standard issue for most of my people. She turned it over in her good hand. Her broken wrist made it awkward to grip properly. How do I... Don't. He moved behind her, adjusted her stance, her grip. His body pressed against her back, his hands covering hers. Feet shoulder-width apart, slight bend in your knees, lean forward just enough to absorb the recoil. His breath was warm against her ear. Sight alignment. Front sight, rear sight, target, all in a line, squeeze the trigger. Don't pull, just steady pressure until it breaks. What if I miss? Then you die. So don't miss. He stepped back. Poppy raised the gun, aimed at the target. Her hand shook. Breathe, Dante said. She breathed. Squeeze. She squeezed. The gun kicked. The sound was deafening even with the concrete walls to muffle it. The bullet punched a hole in the target. 3 inches left of center mass. Again. She fired. Closer this time. Again. Again, again, again. By the time the magazine was empty, her arm ached. Her ears rang. And the target had 15 holes clustered around the center. Dante handed her another loaded magazine. Reload. She fumbled with it. Her broken wrist made everything harder. The magazine fell. She picked it up. Tried again. Finally got it seated. Faster. I'm trying. Try harder. In a fight, you won't have time to think. Just react. She reloaded again. Faster. Still clumsy, but functional. Shoot. She fired through the entire magazine. Faster this time. Less careful. But most of the shots still found their mark. When the slide locked back empty, Dante took the gun from her. You're a natural, he said. I don't feel like one. You're not supposed to. That comes later. He set the gun aside, picked up something else from the weapons rack. A knife, 7 inches of steel, serrated on one edge, wicked sharp on the other. Close quarters, he said. When you don't have time to reload, when someone's on top of you and you need to survive. He demonstrated. Fast, efficient movements. Where to cut. Where to stab. How to use your body weight to drive the blade deeper. It was brutal, clinical, and absolutely necessary. Try it, he said. He handed her the knife. For the next hour, he taught her how to kill with her hands. On. They trained for 3 days straight. Shooting, hand-to-hand combat, tactical thinking, how to clear a room, how to use cover, how to tell the difference between a threat and a distraction. Poppy's body screamed. Her broken wrist was agony. Her muscles tore and rebuilt. She vomited twice from exhaustion and kept going. Dante pushed her relentlessly. No mercy, no praise. Just cold evaluation and the occasional nod when she didn't fuck up. On the 3rd night, they were in the gym, a converted ballroom on the 2nd floor, running knife drills when Marco burst in. Boss, we have a problem. Dante didn't lower his blade. Talk. Marco Scarpari just torched 3 of our warehouses, killed 8 men, Left a message. What message? He's coming here, tomorrow night, and he's bringing everyone he has left. Dante's jaw tightened. How many? 20, maybe 25. We have 16. I know. The math was simple. They were outnumbered, and in a fight like that, numbers mattered. Dante looked at Poppy. She looked back and made a decision. What about me? She asked. Marco blinked. What? You said 16. Does that count me? You're not... He stopped, looked at Dante. Tell him, Poppy said. Dante's expression was unreadable. Then, she's one of us. If she wants to fight, she fights. Marco's mouth opened, closed. Boss, she's been training for 3 days. She'll get herself killed. Then that's her choice. Dante, get out. Prep the men. I want everyone armed and positioned by sunset tomorrow. Marco left. Alone again, Dante turned to Poppy. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. Why? Because if I don't, I'll spend the rest of my life as something you have to protect, something you have to worry about, something weak. You're not weak. Then prove it. She stepped closer. Let me fight. He stared at her for a long moment. Then he kissed her forehead. Try not to die, he said quietly. Same to you. The next day crawled past. Poppy spent the morning in the garden with Marigold. The kitten chased butterflies through the lavender. The roses bloomed in riots of color. Everything was alive and growing and completely oblivious to the violence coming. She memorized it all, just in case. That afternoon, Dante's men arrived. They moved through the mansion like ghosts, checking weapons, running drills, setting up defensive positions. Most of them ignored Poppy. A few gave her looks that ranged from curious to contemptuous. One, a stocky man with a scar bisecting his left eye, stopped in front of her. You Valieri's girl? I'm nobody's girl. He laughed. You'll be a corpse by midnight. Get in line. His smile faded. Dante appeared behind her. Problem, Victor? No problem, boss. But the way Victor looked at Poppy made it clear the conversation wasn't finished. Evening came too fast. Sunset painted the mansion in shades of orange and red. Dante gathered everyone in the main hall, 16 men plus Poppy, all armed, all waiting. Marco Scarpari is coming for blood, Dante said. His voice carried. He wants revenge for his uncle, for his men, for everything we've taken from him, and he's going to try to burn this house down with us inside it. He looked at each person in turn. We're outnumbered, but we have the advantage of position. We know this house. We control the entrances, and we're fighting for something worth more than revenge. What's that? Someone asked. Survival. He pulled out his gun, checked the magazine, slammed it home. They'll come at us from multiple angles, front, back, maybe the sides. We hold the choke points. We make them bleed for every room, and we don't stop until they're all dead or gone. Silence. Questions? No one spoke. Then get to your positions. The men dispersed. Dante turned to Poppy. You're with me. Where? The greenhouse. Her stomach dropped. Why there? Because it's the farthest from the main assault points. If things go bad, you run. There's an exit through the back that leads to the woods. You take it, and you don't look back. I'm not running. Yes, you are. His hand cupped her face. If I die tonight, someone needs to survive who knows the truth about all of this. About the Scarparis. About my organization. About everything. Dante, promise me. She wanted to refuse, to spit in his face, to tell him she was done being protected, but the look in his eyes stopped her. He was terrified. Not for himself, for her. I promise, she whispered. He kissed her, hard and desperate and final. Then he handed her a gun. Stay alive, he said. You too. Try it. They waited in the greenhouse. The glass panels had been repaired. Moonlight streamed through them, illuminating rows of plants Poppy had cultivated over weeks. Orchids, herbs, vegetables in various stages of growth. Life surrounded by the promise of death. Dante stood by the door, gun in hand, listening. Poppy crouched behind a potting bench. Her own gun felt slippery in her grip. Her broken wrist throbbed. Minutes stretched into hours. Then they heard it. Gunfire. Distant at first, then closer. The sound of glass breaking, men shouting, screams cut short. Dante's body went rigid. It started. More gunfire. Explosions. The house itself seemed to shake. Poppy's hands trembled. She forced them still. The greenhouse door flew open. Victor stumbled in. Blood poured from a wound in his side. His gun was gone. "They breached the west wing," he gasped. "Too many. We're falling back." "How many dead?" Dante asked. 5, maybe 6. "Where's Marco?" "Main hall. Coming this way." Dante swore. "Get to the panic room. Lock yourself in." "Boss, go." Victor stumbled back out. Dante turned to Poppy. "Remember what I taught you?" "Yes." "Good, because you're about to use it." The greenhouse door exploded inward. 3 men poured through, armed, scanning. One spotted Dante and raised his weapon. Dante shot him in the face. The second man fired. Bullets shattered glass, tore through plants. Poppy dropped behind the potting bench. Dirt exploded around her. She raised her gun, aimed, squeezed. The second man went down. The third charged Dante, hand to hand. They crashed through a row of seedlings, grappling, punching. The man got a hand around Dante's throat. Poppy stood, aimed, but more men were coming through the door. 4 of them, 5, 6, too many. Dante saw them. His eyes went wide. "Run!" he roared. "No, run!" One of the men turned toward her, raised his gun. Poppy fired first, missed, fired again, hit him in the shoulder. He spun, fell, but another had already replaced him. She pulled the trigger. Click. Empty. The man smiled. Then his head exploded. Dante stood behind him, gun smoking. "I said run!" But there was nowhere to run. The greenhouse was surrounded. More men poured in. Dante fired, dropped 2, 3. Then his slide locked back empty. He threw the gun at the closest attacker, drew a knife, became something feral. Poppy scrambled for the dead man's weapon, grabbed it. Her broken wrist screamed. She fired one-handed, wild, desperate. Someone tackled her. She hit the ground hard. The gun flew from her hand. A fist connected with her face. Stars exploded. She tasted blood. Hands closed around her throat. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her vision tunneled. Then the pressure released. She gasped, coughed, looked up. Dante stood over her attacker's corpse. Blood covered him head to toe. He looked inhuman, a demon wearing human skin. He pulled her to her feet. "We're leaving. Now." "What about now?" He dragged her toward the back exit. Behind them, more men crashed through the greenhouse. Bullets chewed through wood and glass. They burst out into the night. The grounds were chaos. Bodies everywhere. Dante's men, Scarpari's men, all dead or dying. Fire licked at the mansion's east wing. Smoke billowed into the sky. And standing in the middle of it all was a young man with dark hair and Angelo Scarpari's eyes, Marco Scarpari. He saw them, smiled, raised a gun. "Run," Dante whispered. Then he shoved Poppy behind him and charged. Marco fired. The bullet caught Dante in the chest. He stumbled, kept moving. Marco fired again. Dante fell. "No!" Poppy screamed. She ran to him, dropped to her knees. Blood soaked through his shirt. Too much blood. "Told you," he coughed. "To run. Shut up. You're fine. You're dying." He grabbed her hand, squeezed. "Get out of here." "I'm not leaving you." "Yes, you are." Marco's footsteps approached. Poppy looked up. He stood over them, gun pointed at her head. "Poppy Vale," he said, "the woman who started all of this. One pink flower at a time. Go to hell. After you." His finger tightened on the trigger. Dante's hand moved, fast. He pulled a knife from his belt, threw it. The blade buried itself in Marco's throat. Marco's gun fell. He staggered, clutched at the knife. Blood poured between his fingers. He fell, twitched once, went still. Dante collapsed back. "Got him," he whispered. "Stay with me." Poppy pressed her hands against his chest. Blood welled between her fingers. "Don't you dare die." "Can't promise that." "Try." He smiled. Blood stained his teeth. I'm sorry for all of it. Your mother, your shop, your... I forgive you. His eyes widened. You don't mean that. No. Tears streamed down her face, but I'm saying it anyway. Behind them, the mansion continued to burn. Around them, the battle had gone silent. Everyone was dead. Except them. Poppy pulled out her phone, called for help with shaking, bloody hands, and prayed they'd arrive before Dante's heart stopped beating against her palms. The ambulance arrived 14 minutes later. 14 minutes of Poppy kneeling in blood-soaked dirt, her hands pressed against Dante's chest, feeling his heartbeat grow weaker with each passing second. 14 minutes of him staring up at the sky with unfocused eyes, his breath coming in shallow gasps that sounded like drowning. 14 minutes that felt like dying in slow motion. The paramedics pulled her away. She fought them, screamed. Her broken wrist flared with pain as someone restrained her arms. They loaded Dante onto a stretcher, hooked him to machines that beeped frantically, pumped something into his veins through tubes that looked too fragile to hold life together. Ma'am, you need to let us work. I'm going with him. You can't. I said I'm going with him. Something in her voice made the paramedic step back. Maybe it was the blood covering her from head to toe. Maybe it was the look in her eyes. The kind of look that said she'd already killed tonight and wouldn't hesitate to do it again. They let her climb into the ambulance. The ride to the hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights, and Dante's hand going cold in hers. She squeezed it hard enough to hurt, willing warmth back into his skin, willing his heart to keep beating. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you fucking dare leave me now. His eyes fluttered open, found hers. Stubborn, he breathed. Takes one to know one. His mouth twitched, almost a smile. Then his eyes rolled back and the machine started screaming. They took him straight into surgery. 6 hours. That's how long Poppy sat in a waiting room that smelled like disinfectant and despair, surrounded by plastic chairs and magazines. Nobody read. Her clothes were stiff with dried blood. Her broken wrist throbbed. Her face was swollen where she'd been hit. She looked like a crime scene. People stared, whispered. A nurse tried to examine her injuries. Poppy waved her away. I'm fine. Ma'am, you're covered in blood. It's not mine. You should at least let us. I said I'm fine. The nurse left. Poppy sat alone and waited. Near dawn, a surgeon emerged, still wearing blood-stained scrubs, looking exhausted in the way only people who've spent hours holding someone's life together can look. Miss Vale? She stood. Her legs barely held her. Is he alive? Barely. The bullet collapsed his left lung and nicked his pulmonary artery. We repaired what we could, but the next 48 hours are critical. If he makes it through that, he has a chance. Can I see him? He's in recovery, still unconscious, but the surgeon hesitated. Given your condition, maybe you should get yourself checked first. I'm seeing him, now. The surgeon sighed. Room 412, 4th floor, but only for a few minutes. Poppy didn't wait for more permission. She found the room, pushed open the door with shaking hands. Dante lay in the bed looking smaller than she'd ever seen him. Tubes ran from his arms. Monitors beeped steadily. His chest rose and fell with mechanical precision, the ventilator breathing for him because his body had forgotten how. She pulled a chair to his bedside, sat down heavily. And finally, alone with him in the quiet, she let herself break. Not sobbing, not dramatic, just tears running silently down her face while she held his hand and whispered things she'd never say if he could hear them. You're an asshole, you know that? A murderer and a liar, and the worst thing that ever happened to me. You killed my mother. You destroyed my life. You dragged me into hell and then acted surprised when I started burning too. She squeezed his hand tighter. But you also saved me. In the most fucked up way possible, you saved me from drowning in a life that was already dead. And now I don't know how to survive without hating you and needing you at the same time. His hand didn't squeeze back. The machines kept beeping. Outside the window, the sun rose over Chicago, and Poppy realized something that made her chest ache. She'd finally become exactly what she'd asked to be, a monster. And it felt exactly as terrible as it should. Dante woke 3 days later. Poppy was asleep in the chair beside his bed when his eyes opened. Her head rested on the edge of the mattress. her broken wrist propped awkwardly on the blanket. She'd refused to leave, refused to eat much, refused to do anything except wait. His hand moved, touched her hair. She jerked awake. Their eyes met. "You look like hell," he rasped. His voice was barely there, shredded by the ventilator tube they'd finally removed that morning. "So do you." "How bad?" "You died twice on the table. They brought you back both times." "Persistent bastards." "You can thank them later." He tried to sit up, pain flared across his face. He collapsed back against the pillows, breathing hard. "Marco?" he asked. "Dead." "You got him." "The others?" "All dead. Yours and his. We're the only ones who made it out." Dante closed his eyes. "The house?" "Damaged, not destroyed. Your people are already repairing it." "My people?" he laughed. The sound was bitter. "What's left of them?" "Enough. Marco and his guards were apparently here to finish the job. Everyone else still thinks you're in control." "Are they wrong?" Poppy looked at him, at the tubes and machines keeping him alive, at the way his skin looked gray against the white sheets. "I don't know," she said honestly. "Are they?" He met her gaze. "That depends on you." "On me? You're the one who's survived intact. You're the one they'll look to now. If you walk away, this entire empire collapses. If I stay, I become part of it. You already are part of it." She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city stretching endlessly in all directions. "I killed 3 men that night," she said quietly. "Shot 2, stabbed 1. And I don't feel anything about it. No guilt, no horror, just—" She stopped. "Nothing. That's called survival. Is it? Or is it called becoming exactly the thing I should have been running from? Does it matter? It should. But it doesn't." She turned to face him. "No, it doesn't. And that terrifies me more than anything else that's happened." Dante watched her, studied her like she was something he was seeing for the first time. "You could still leave," he said. "I wouldn't stop you. Not now. Not after everything." "Where would I go?" "Anywhere. New city, new name, new life. I have money hidden that the organization doesn't know about. Enough to set you up somewhere safe. And then what? Spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering when someone else figures out who I am? Better than staying in hell." "Maybe." She walked back to his bedside, sat down. "Or maybe hell is the only place I understand anymore." His hand found hers, squeezed weakly. "Then welcome home, flower girl." The next weeks passed in a strange liminal space between hospital rooms and criminal empires. Dante recovered slowly, painfully, learning to breathe without machines, learning to walk without falling, learning to exist inside a body that had been torn apart and stitched back together. Poppy divided her time between his bedside and managing what was left of his organization. It turned out running a criminal empire wasn't that different from running a failing flower shop, just more guns and higher stakes. Marco appeared first, the guard who'd burst into the greenhouse. He brought her papers to sign, decisions to make, problems that needed solving. "Victor's crew is pushing back," he said one afternoon. "They don't want to take orders from a civilian. Then they can leave." "They won't go quietly." "Then make them go loudly. I don't care which." Marco's eyebrow rose. "You're serious? Do I look like I'm joking?" He studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "I'll handle it." "Good. And Marco?" "Yeah?" "Next time someone questions whether I belong here, remind them I'm the only reason there's still a here to question." He smiled. "Yes, ma'am." Word spread fast after that. The woman who'd been Dante Valieri's pet project had teeth. People started listening, and Poppy discovered something unsettling. She was good at this. Not the violence, though she'd proven she could handle that when necessary, but the strategy, the chess game, the careful balancing of fear and respect that kept people in line without turning them into enemies. She'd learned from watching Dante. Now she was becoming something else entirely. 6 weeks after the attack, Dante was finally released from the hospital. Poppy drove him back to the mansion in the same black sedan they'd taken to the city the day everything changed. He sat in the passenger seat, his movements still careful, his chest wrapped in bandages under his shirt. Neither of them spoke during the drive. When they pulled up to the house, Dante stared at it for a long moment. The east wing had been rebuilt, the broken windows replaced. Fresh paint covered the bullet holes. From the outside, it looked almost normal, but they both knew better. "Ready?" Poppy asked. "No." "Good. Neither am I." They walked in together. Mrs. Chen met them in the entryway. Her expression was carefully neutral. "Welcome home, Mr. Villieri. Miss Vale, I've prepared your rooms." "Thank you, Mrs. Chen," Poppy said. Then, because she'd learned that small gestures mattered, "And thank you for holding everything together while we were gone." The housekeeper's face softened fractionally. "Of course, miss." Dante made it up the stairs slowly. By the time they reached his quarters, he was breathing hard. Poppy helped him to the couch. He sank into it with a pained exhale. "I'm getting old," he muttered. "You're 36. "I feel 90. That's what getting shot in the chest will do." "Noted." Poppy sat beside him. They stared at the fireplace, unlit because it was summer now. Time had kept moving even while they'd been frozen in that hospital room. "What happens now?" Dante asked. "I don't know." "You've been running things. You must have some idea." "I've been keeping things from falling apart. That's not the same as having a plan." "Sounds like a plan to me." She laughed. The sound was tired. "We should probably talk." "About?" "About your mother, about mine, about all of it." His jaw tightened. "What's there to talk about?" "The truth, the whole truth, not the version you gave me in pieces." He was silent for a long moment. Then, "My mother found out what my father really did for a living when I was 15. She tried to leave, take me with her, start over somewhere safe." Poppy waited. "He killed her for it. Made it look like a heart attack. Natural causes. No one suspected. And I—" His voice cracked. I knew what he'd done. But I was too afraid to say anything, too afraid he'd kill me, too." "So you became him instead?" "Yes. I became the thing I was most afraid of, because it was easier than being the victim." "And my mother?" "Your mother worked for one of my companies. She was smart, too smart. She figured out we were laundering money through her department, and she threatened to go to the authorities." He looked at her finally. "I could have paid her off, could have threatened her, could have done 100 things that didn't involve killing her. But I was young and stupid and terrified that everything I'd built would collapse. So I made a choice. To murder a dying woman. Yes, and I've lived with that choice every day since, watching it eat me alive from the inside. Until you fell into that cathedral and reminded me what it felt like to be something other than a monster." Poppy's chest ached. "You thought saving me would balance the scales. I thought it would let me sleep at night, but it didn't. It just made everything worse. Because the more I got to know you, the more I realized what I'd taken from you. And I couldn't undo it. Couldn't take it back. Could only watch you discover the truth and hate me for it. I do hate you. I know. But I also—" She stopped. The words stuck in her throat. "I also understand you, and that's worse than hating you, because it means I see exactly how you became this. And I see myself walking the same path." Dante's hand found hers. "You don't have to." "Don't I? I've killed people, run your organization, made decisions that destroyed lives. I'm already halfway there." "Then stop. Walk away. Before you cross the line I can't come back from." "What line is that?" "The one where you stop seeing people as people, where they become problems to solve, obstacles to remove. That's when you know you're lost." Poppy thought about Victor's crew, about the cold efficiency with which she'd ordered them gone. What if I've already crossed it? Then we're both damned. They sat in silence. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Finally, Poppy spoke. "I'm not leaving." Dante looked at her. "Why not?" "Because there's nothing left out there for me. No shop, no family, no life that doesn't involve looking over my shoulder. But here," she gestured at the mansion around them, "here I have a garden, and a kitten, and a purpose, however twisted it is." "That's not a reason to stay." "No, but this is." She turned to face him fully. "I'm staying because somewhere in all this violence and grief and fucked up history, I found something I didn't know I was looking for. What's that? Someone who looks at all the broken pieces of me and doesn't try to fix them, just accepts that broken is what I am now, and stands beside me anyway. Dante's eyes went soft. Poppy, don't make this more than it is. We're not a love story. We're a tragedy, but we're a tragedy together, and that has to count for something. He pulled her close, carefully, his chest still too damaged for anything rough. She rested her head on his shoulder and listened to his heartbeat. Steady, alive, real. What do we do now? She whispered. We survive. That's all we've ever done. Is it enough? It has to be. 3 months later, the garden was finished. Not just repaired. Transformed. Poppy had spent weeks rebuilding what Dante's grief had destroyed. Roses climbed the old brick walls in explosions of crimson and white. Lavender lined the paths in purple waves. The greenhouse was filled with orchids and herbs and vegetables growing in careful rows. The fountain ran again, clear water catching sunlight in a way that looked almost holy. It was the most beautiful thing she'd ever created, and it was built on a foundation of bones and blood. One evening near sunset, Dante found her kneeling in the dirt beside a newly planted hydrangea. Her hands were covered in soil, her hair was falling out of its bun. She looked exactly like she had that first day she'd trespassed into this place. Except her eyes were different now. Harder, older. She'd earned those eyes. It's done, she said without looking up. I can see that. What do you think? I think my mother would have loved it. And you? He knelt beside her, slower than he used to. His chest still ached sometimes when he moved wrong. I think you took something dead and made it live again, just like you did with me. She snorted. You're not alive, you're just breathing. Is there a difference? Yes, but you'll figure it out eventually. She stood, brushed dirt off her jeans, looked around at the garden surrounding them. Do you ever regret it? She asked. Bringing me here? Every day? Good, you should. Do you regret staying? Poppy thought about it, really thought about it, about the life she'd lost, the person she used to be, the innocent woman who'd tripped in a cathedral and accidentally destroyed everything. That person was dead. In her place stood someone else, someone harder, colder, capable of things that would have horrified the old Poppy, but also someone who knew exactly who she was, what she'd become, and had chosen it anyway. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. I regret what it cost, but not the choice itself. Dante stood beside her. They looked out at the garden together as the sun sank lower, painting everything in shades of gold. We should get married, he said suddenly. Poppy laughed. What? I'm serious, married, legal, the whole thing. Why? Because if something happens to me, you need legal protection. Right now, you're just the woman I live with. But if you're my wife, I become legitimate. Yes. That's the most unromantic proposal I've ever heard. Would you have preferred me to kneel? I'm not sure my chest can handle it. She looked at him, at the scars barely visible under his shirt, at the gray in his hair that hadn't been there 6 months ago, at the way he stood like someone who'd died and been dragged back against his will. This isn't a fairy tale, she said. I know. There's no happy ending. I know that too. We're both damaged beyond repair. Seems fitting. She thought about saying no, about drawing a line somewhere, about keeping at least one part of herself separate from this world. But the truth was simpler than that. There was no part of herself left that wasn't already stained. Fine, she said, but I'm keeping my name. I wouldn't expect anything less, and I want it done quietly. No ceremony, no guests, just paperwork. Done. And you're going to plant that hydrangea with me right now. He blinked. What? You heard me. If we're doing this, you're putting your hands in the dirt beside mine, literally and figuratively. I don't know how to... Then learn. She handed him a trowel. Dante stared at it like it was a foreign object. Then slowly, he knelt beside the half-planted hydrangea, dug his hands into the soil, let the earth collect under his fingernails the way it had under hers for months. Together, they finished planting it. When they were done, Dante's hands were covered in dirt. His suit was ruined. And for the first time since his mother died, he looked like someone who belonged in a garden instead of a graveyard. "See," Poppy said, "you're not completely hopeless. Just mostly hopeless. That's all I ask." They sat back on their heels, looked at what they'd built. A garden on top of graves, beauty growing from death, life insisting on existing despite everything trying to kill it. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. They got married 3 weeks later in a courthouse downtown. No flowers, no music, just a judge who looked bored and 2 witnesses pulled from the hallway who had no idea what they were witnessing. Poppy wore jeans and a shirt that smelled like soil. Dante wore a suit that actually fit for once. They said the words, signed the papers, became legally bound in a way that felt less significant than everything they'd already survived together. Walking out of the courthouse, Poppy looked at the ring on her finger. A simple band, white gold, no diamond, nothing flashy. "This doesn't change anything," she said. "I know. We're still who we are. I know that too." "Then why do it?" Dante stopped, turned to face her on the courthouse steps. Behind him, Chicago stretched endlessly in all directions, a city full of people who had no idea what darkness lived in its corners. "Because," he said quietly, "I wanted there to be something clean between us, something that wasn't built on lies or violence or grief, just a choice we both made freely. There's nothing clean about us. No, but there's this." He took her hand, the one wearing his ring, and for the first time since the cathedral, Poppy felt something that might have been peace. It didn't last. Peace never did. But in that moment, standing on the courthouse steps with her hand in his and the city sprawling below them, it was enough. 6 months after the attack, Poppy woke before dawn. She lay in bed beside Dante, listening to him breathe. He slept better now. The nightmares had faded. His chest had healed. He moved through the house like someone who'd remembered how to be human. But he'd never be the same. Neither would she. She slipped out of bed carefully, pulled on clothes. Let Marigold, now grown into a full-sized cat, follow her downstairs and out into the garden. The sky was just starting to lighten. Dawn painted everything in shades of gray and purple. Dew clung to the roses. The air smelled like earth and lavender. Poppy walked to the fountain, sat on its edge, stared at her reflection in the water. She looked different now, thinner, harder. Her hair had grown longer, her eyes had changed. They held things that couldn't be spoken aloud. She thought about the woman who'd fallen in a cathedral 6 months ago. That woman was dead, murdered by circumstance and choice and the slow erosion of innocence. In her place was someone else, someone who ran a criminal empire with cold efficiency, someone who'd killed and would kill again if necessary, someone who'd married a monster and become one herself, but also someone who'd built a garden from nothing, someone who'd refused to let death have the final word, someone who'd looked at the worst parts of herself and said, "Yes, this is who I am now, and I'm done apologizing for it." Behind her, footsteps approached. Dante sat beside her on the fountain's edge. He didn't speak, just sat there in comfortable silence while the sun slowly rose. "Do you think we're good people?" Poppy asked finally. "No." "Do you think we could be?" "No." "Then what are we?" He thought about it for a long moment. "Survivors," he said. "That's all. That's enough." Poppy looked at the garden surrounding them, at the life they'd built from the wreckage of everything they'd destroyed. "My mother told me once that flowers grow anywhere," she said quietly, "in cracks in concrete, in abandoned lots, in places where nothing should be able to survive. She said it was because life doesn't need permission, it just needs a chance. Your mother was a wise woman. She was. And you killed her." "Yes." "And I'm sitting here beside you anyway." "Yes." "That makes me complicit in my own destruction. Or it makes you someone who chose survival over revenge. Is that what I chose? Isn't it?" She thought about Vale Blooms, about dirt, about the woman she used to be who worried about overdue bills and broken heaters, and whether she'd have enough to eat that week. That woman had been dying slowly, starving in a life that gave her nothing. This woman, this monster in a garden, was finally, terribly, brutally alive. I don't know if I made the right choice, Poppy said. Does anyone? No, but most people don't have to kill for their choices. True, but most people don't get to build something like this either. He gestured at the garden, at the mansion, at everything they'd fought and bled to protect. We're not good people, Poppy. We'll never be good people. But we're here. We're breathing. And we're standing in a garden that shouldn't exist. That's more than most people get. She leaned her head on his shoulder, felt the steady rise and fall of his chest, listened to his heartbeat, and made peace with the fact that peace wasn't something she'd ever really have. But she had this: a garden built on graves, a marriage built on murder, a life built on all the wrong choices that somehow added up to something worth keeping. It wasn't the ending she would have written 6 months ago, but it was the only ending that made sense now. That afternoon, while Poppy was pruning the roses, a car pulled up to the mansion. She recognized the man who stepped out immediately. Silver hair, expensive suit, the same man she'd seen arguing with Dante months ago. He walked into the garden like he owned it, stopped a few feet away. "Mrs. Valieri," he said. "We haven't been formally introduced. I'm Vincent Carboni. I represent the families you and your husband have been disrupting." Poppy didn't put down her pruning shears. "Get off my property." "I'm here to make a peace offering." "Not interested." "You should be. The war between Valieri and the Scarparis cost both sides everything. But it's over now. Marco is dead. Dante nearly joined him, and everyone else is tired of bleeding." So I'm proposing a truce, official, recognized by all parties, no more retaliation, no more bloodshed, just peace. Poppy studied him. "What's the catch?" "No catch. Just acknowledgement that you and Dante control the north side. We stay out of your territory. You stay out of ours. And if we don't agree, then the killing continues, and eventually everyone dies, including you." She thought about it, about the bodies she'd already seen, the blood that had been spilled, the price they'd paid to get here. "I'll discuss it with my husband," she said finally. "Good. You have my number. Call when you've decided." He turned to leave. "Mr. Carboni?" He looked back. "If this is a trick," Poppy said quietly, "I'll kill you myself. Not Dante, not his men, me, personally. And I'll make sure you suffer first." Something in her expression made him go pale. "It's not a trick." "Good. Then we'll talk." He left. Poppy went back to pruning roses. When Dante came out later, she told him about the offer. He listened carefully, then smiled. "What do you think?" he asked. "I think peace sounds nice, for once." "Me too. Does that make us weak?" "No, it makes us smart. There's a difference." They stood together in the garden, watching the sun set, letting the silence settle. And for the first time since the cathedral, Poppy felt something that might have been hope. Small, fragile, barely there, but real. 2 years later, the garden had grown beyond recognition. What had started as Poppy's private sanctuary had expanded across the entire estate. Roses climbed every wall. Lavender lined every path. The greenhouse had been doubled in size. Vegetable gardens fed not just the mansion, but local shelters Poppy had started supporting anonymously. She'd turned death into life. And in doing so, she'd found something she hadn't expected: purpose. She and Dante had settled into a rhythm. He ran the business side of the organization. She handled everything else, including making sure the violence stayed contained, controlled, necessary but not excessive. They weren't good people, but they were better than they'd been, and that had to count for something. One evening, while working in the garden, Poppy felt hands settle on her shoulders. She leaned back into Dante's chest, let him hold her while the sun set around them. "I've been thinking," he said. "Dangerous. I want to create something, a foundation, in your mother's name." Poppy went very still. "What?" "Medical support for people who can't afford treatment, cancer patients specifically. Something to balance." He stopped. "Something to make up for what I took." "You can't make up for murder." "I know, but I can try." She turned in his arms, looked up at him. His eyes were different now too, less empty, more human. "Why?" she asked. "Because you taught me something I'd forgotten. That dead things can grow again if you're willing to put your hands in the dirt, and I want to try, even if it's too late, even if it changes nothing. Poppy's chest ached. It won't bring her back. I know. And it won't fix what you did. I know that too. But you want to do it anyway. Yes. She thought about her mother, about all the nights she'd sat beside her hospital bed, holding her hand while cancer ate her from the inside, about the bills that had kept coming long after the body was buried. Okay, she whispered. Let's do it. They stood together in the garden as darkness fell, and somewhere above them, Poppy hoped her mother was watching, hoped she understood, hoped she could forgive what her daughter had become in order to survive. 5 years after the cathedral, Poppy sat on the fountain's edge with Marigold curled in her lap. The garden was in full bloom. Everything she'd planted had grown wild and beautiful, the kind of beauty that only came from chaos learning to be still. Dante emerged from the house carrying 2 glasses of wine. He sat beside her, handed her one. They didn't toast, just drank in comfortable silence while night settled around them. Do you ever think about what would have happened? Poppy asked. If I'd brought the right flowers that day? Every day. And I think you'd be dead. Or worse, still drowning in that failing shop, still alone, still surviving but not living. Is this living? He gestured at the garden, at the mansion, at everything they'd built. You tell me. Poppy thought about it, about the blood on her hands that would never wash clean, about the people she'd killed to stay alive, about the man sitting beside her who'd murdered her mother and somehow become the person she trusted most in the world. It wasn't a fairy tale. It wasn't even a love story. It was something messier, more honest, more human. Yes, she said finally. This is living. Then I guess we did something right. Or something wrong that turned out right. Is there a difference? I don't know anymore. Marigold purred in her lap. The fountain ran behind them. The garden breathed with life all around them. And Poppy realized that after everything, after all the death and grief and violence, she'd found something she never expected. Home. Not the house, not the mansion, not the empire they'd built from bones. But this moment, this man, this garden, this fragile, impossible peace, it wouldn't last forever. Nothing did. But for now, for tonight, it was enough. Dante took her hand, the one still wearing his ring. She squeezed back, and they sat together in the garden they'd built from nothing, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, 2 monsters who'd learned to be human again. Not through redemption, not through forgiveness, but through the simple act of choosing every single day to keep their hands in the dirt and refuse to let death have the final word. The garden would keep growing, and so would they, however broken they were, however scarred. Together, always together. And that, Poppy thought as she rested her head on Dante's shoulder, was the only happy ending they deserved, the only one they'd ever get, and the only one that mattered.